Hello, everyone. We are in Alpharetta, Georgia, and we are delighted to be talking with Ken Harmon of Stalite Lightweight Aggregates. He was the man that I called 22 years ago, soon after I joined Fulton Concrete, when I needed a crash course on lightweight aggregates. I knew nothing about lightweight aggregates. Ken is one of our multi-decade industry veterans, and I'm so eager to learn more details of his history. Ken, good to be with you. Please tell us your story. Start at the beginning, please.
Thanks, Bill. Well, I'm one of those rare folks that was actually born in Atlanta at Crawford Long Hospital, and my parents they had bought a house and moved to Smyrna when I was about a year old, and so I grew up in Smyrna. And by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, I was always looking for ways to make a little spending money. So I was going around the neighborhood trying to get yards to mow and any kind of odd projects, odd jobs that the neighbors would pay me to do. And my dad was always working on cars or building something. So he had taught me how to use tools. And then I met a guy that went around our neighborhood. He did a lot of remodeling jobs and a lot of enclosing carports and that kind of thing. And he let me work with him. And I never had a desire to work in a McDonald's or a retail shop, even though we had a friend that had owned the local hardware store. Just never had. I always liked doing construction and building stuff and doing stuff outside. So as a teenager, my parents had bought 4 acres, and I had horses, and so by the time it was time to decide to go to college, I didn't have any desire to go off to college somewhere. So I heard about Southern Tech up in Marietta, and it was a division of Georgia Tech, and it was 7.5 miles from my parents' house. And so I could keep working part-time and go full-time to school.
And to interrupt just real quickly, and back then it was called Southern Tech.
It was Southern Technical.
It wasn't Polytechnical, right? Is that correct?
It was Southern Technical Institute.
Yes.
And then later it became Southern Polytechnic State University.
Yes.
And of course now it's part of Kennesaw University.
Yes.
It was Southern Tech, and my diploma says a division of Georgia Tech.
Yes.
So
I remember that.
It was cool, and it was an interesting place. It was a good, I thought it was a good program. So I went to the civil engineering program there.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my background was mechanical, so I didn't get a jump on concrete when I went through engineering school. When I came to Fulton, it was starting from scratch. So so that's good to know. Smyrna, and you were Crawford Long. I was Georgia Baptist. I grew up in it. I'm one of those rare natives as well, so that's good. Talk about how you found your way into construction materials. Tell us about that.
After a couple of years at going to Southern Tech, I was working for a lady that owned a big estate in Smyrna. But she was a descendant of the Campbell Coal Company, and which has a little bit of connection to the old days of concrete in Atlanta. I worked 20 or 30 hours a week doing maintenance on her rental houses and and her property, and it got to be tiring. And I heard about the co-op program where you go to school a quarter and you work a quarter, and I was able to get a position with Georgia Power Company.
Nice.
And so I finished out school working a quarter and going to school a quarter, and worked. First quarter was at Plant Vogtle out from Cartersville. And then I was able to work in the design office the rest of the time with Georgia Power Company. And then they offered me a job at Plant Vogtle when I graduated from school. So I went to work down there for 2 years when they were just beginning to do construction, clearing trees and digging holes. And
what year was that roughly?
That was 1977.
77.
I went to work the first week in April of 1977.
Okay.
And I got, after I graduated, Maria and I got married. My wife and I, 47 years ago. So we moved to Hepzibah, Georgia, and I worked for Georgia Power at Plant Vogtle. But after a couple of years, I felt more like a clerk. I mean, I was exposed to as heavy a construction as you would ever imagine. But I had this desire to be an engineer.
Yes.
And I was, so I left Georgia Power and I came back and went to work for HNTB in Atlanta doing bridge design. And so I worked for them for about 8 years. And then when I began working for HNTB, they encouraged us to do extracurricular activities. And I found out about the Georgia ACI program.
Yes.
And that they had monthly meetings and I could network with folks. And so I started going to that, and that's where I met Sam Morris of GCPA and Jeff Speck. And Jeff and I, hit it off and became friends. And at the time when I first started going, he was the regional engineer for the PCA, the Portland Cement Association, had a regional office in Atlanta. And so then they wound up closing the PCA office in Atlanta. And so at the time that they closed that office, the local cement shippers they sort of formed an unofficial alliance to carry on the work of promotion for cement-based products in Georgia. And so, and this was happening in the other states too, as they closed, this PCA closed regional offices. They would, the cement shippers would go to the ready mix.
Let me pause you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
I have a question. And we don't have to get deep into it, but what was the reason for PCA closing? Do you remember any inkling of what?
They have steadily moved away from promotion my entire experience. Okay. With the cement guys, they just it was an expensive program. I'm sure they had a top-notch engineer that ran the association, Robert Kuhlman. He was a wonderful gentleman. I loved I met him through ACI as well, and Jeff worked for him, and they but they just decided they couldn't spend the money, I guess, to continue the work of those regional offices. They had them all over the country.
Yes.
And so, but then the cement shippers stepped up and they got each of the local, and the Tennessee Association, the Alabama Association, Mississippi, and they would fund promotion programs. So Jeff started out, they created, as under the umbrella of Georgia Concrete Products Association, the Masonry Institute of Georgia Masonry Institute. And so Jeff was hired to be their executive director. I mean, it was pretty seamless. He just,
right.
They knew they were closing the office and he went right into that position. And so a year and a half after that occurred, after one of the ACI meetings, I asked Jeff, how's it going? And he said, I'm really enjoying it. It's really a good thing. And he was telling me, all about the benefits and what he did. And I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. I was beginning to get a little bored with sitting at a drafting table and doing, I worked on fabulous bridge projects, but still, it sounded really fun what Jeff was doing and dealing more with people. And so I told him that, and he said, well, you need to call Sam, because Monday they're interviewing people for a counterpart job for the ready mix guys. And so I did. Instead of going back to the office, I slipped home and got my resume and took it to Sam. And sure enough, she slipped me in that following Monday morning in line to interview. And that was an interesting interview, because in my memory, it's been a long time ago, but in my memory,
roughly what year would
that
you say?
was in 87.
Okay.
That was early spring or early summer of 87.
Okay.
And it's in my memory, it was a room full of men. I think the entire board of directors
Yes.
was in there. And Walter Harbord from Mathis Aiken was the chairman at the time. So he led the interview. And, you know, he was a very interesting guy. He was a great guy. And I think the vice chair at the time was Doug Walker.
Okay.
And, you know, but I can remember, you know, a bunch of guys. I think Ken Williams was in the office, was in the boardroom at the office of Georgia Concrete Products Association. And so it was interesting. A bunch of the cement guys. I remember Jerry Hedrick with Blue Circle was there, and Ron Griffin from Citadel, the old Citadel Cement. They were there. And so I think they had about 10 folks lined up.
That had to have been just a little bit intimidating.
It was. You know, I've often thought back on, you know, but you know, they were just super
great
guys.
Yeah.
And and I didn't feel all that intimidated as much, but it was kind of interesting to be, you know, interviewed by that many folks, you know, but mostly it was Mr. Harbor, you know, he was, and so that was, you know, that's how I landed that position. And I went up working there for about 6.5 years.
Was it that long?
The association, okay. Yeah. And it was a great time. I had tremendous support from, you know, first of all, the cement guys all mandated that all their sales guys spend 20% of their time doing promotion work. So when we sort of divided the state up into promotion regions, because the first thing I did was I went around and met all of the members of the association and talked to them about what they wanted to see in a promotion program for ready-mix concrete. And so, you know, I learned real quick that there were different priorities in different parts of the state. And so, you know, some people wanted to do parking lot promotions. Some wanted to do flowable fill. That was a big thing at that time. And of course, Atlanta wanted to focus on buildings, on mid-rise and high-rise buildings. And so we divided the state up real similar to the Georgia DOT districts. And in each one, you know, we lined up promotion committee meetings. And the promotion committees were run, usually the chair was an associate producer, an associate member like the cement guys.
Yeah.
Or some places it was the admixture guys.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we had tremendous support. You know, I remember going around meeting everybody. Don Barfield, he worked at Master Builders in those days, and he took me around to Southwest Georgia, Columbus, and Albany and Tifton, and introduced me to folks down that way. And you know, I had just, you know, people that just really took me under their wing and introduced me to everybody, and then supported the promotion programs. You know, we would start this. We did a lot of programs for contractors and engineers where we did demonstration projects on flowable fill, or parking lot, you know, promotion programs. And so it was just a lot of fun. It was exciting. And we also had regional promotion meetings where we met with Sam and I would go to Charlotte or Jackson, Mississippi, or wherever, at least once a year.
Yes.
And meet with the other promotion guys in the other states and
exchange notes,
committees, and compare notes, and so that was, you know, it was a real good time of everybody working together to share ideas and do promotion.
It sounds like, and it was an exciting time for you and a very formative time too.
Yeah, it was.
So carry on from there. Talk about the next stage, the next step.
Well, you know, that whole time was exciting. You know, one of the things that that I recalled as I was thinking about coming in and sharing this was the people who took me under their wing, that were, like Sam. Sam was, she was a great friend. And, even after I left the association, she continued to be a great friend and a great supporter of everything that I did. So, and then, Jeff was, continues to this day. I was with Jeff at ACI last week, and, I always admired, he had a great way of speaking. I always envied his ability to do public speaking, and which always made me nervous, and I've never felt like I was good at it. And he was good at code work and all that kind of stuff. So he was a good inspiration. I think back of all the folks that I dealt with that were such good friends. Ken Williams,
right,
and Thompson.
Yep.
He was. There were a lot of mom and pops back then that are not with us now, like the Kennedys in Statesboro, the O.B. Carr and his family in Savannah. And I remember one of the first ones that I met with when I went down there was Hugh. Now I'm drawing blanks. Hugh Pappy.
Oh yeah,
and
Hugh.
His two sons, Hugh Jr.
and Hugh Jr.'s on our board
now. and Richard, his other son, and you go W.L. Maddox. I think W.L. was on the board at the time that we that I had the interview, but just great people. The Pursleys, of course, and some of those are still around. The Davis family, and
now you saw Ken's, that we did I got to interview Bobby Hopkins.
Bobby was one of those guys that that was always there if you ever needed anything.
Yes.
He was a great supporter of the association. Any programs that we did down towards Waycross, he was right there. And Ken still, there's still some of those guys that are basic ready mix, Tony Cantrell and his son Ben now.
Yes.
So there's still some of those.
Yes.
But the thing about all those companies, the guys were just really family, hardworking people. But that's the way it is with the big companies too. I mean, I love working with Argos/Summit.
Right.
There's just not any harder working people than like those poor QC guys.
Right.
They work all day and then they have to be back in the office at midnight, for a 2 o'clock pour. And so, those guys, they just don't come any more salt of the earth than the guys, with Thomas. And, I've just, still to this day love working with those guys.
I completely understand, and I know what you mean. So connect us into Stalite. Talk about that. How did that opportunity present itself, and tell us a little bit.
Stalite was a member of the association, and Bill Grigg would come by the office pretty often whenever he was in town, just to visit with Sam and would come and visit with me. And then one day he stuck his head in my office and said, I'm looking for a sales guy for down here. And so it turned out that one of the cement guys that I was friends with had just lost his place at the cement company. And so I started telling him about that guy.
Yes.
And he said, no. Are you interested in it? And I said, well, I'll think about it, And so that was that was early in 1993, I think. And because I did my 31st anniversary this year. And so that was early in the year, and he just kept, every month or so he'd come by the office or track me down or call me and meet me, and he just kept on until I finally, I finally wound up going to work for them, and that's been a good thing. They're
Yes.
family owned business, and I've just enjoyed the culture, and it's been a good experience.
And this is another thing we could go deep into, but I feel like we need a little bit. Talk just a little bit about Stalites, a little bit about the history, kind of and the idea of lightweight, the material, where it is. You know what I mean? Just at a high level for people listening that some may not know about this.
Well, the company, Alan Johnson, he was had a block plant in Salisbury, North Carolina, and eventually built a concrete pipe plant in Salisbury at the same location. And he was buying lightweight aggregate for the block plant from out of Virginia. But he was one of those guys that he could do anything better than what he could buy. And so, so he eventually put in some sintering machines, which was different from the way we make lightweight now. It was the sintering machine was, and the best thing I can describe it as, it was a grate that went through a flame.
Yes.
And I think back of the old Burger King commercials,
yes,
where the
flame
hamburger patty
yes.
was going through the flame. Well, they would mix clay with coke and run it through on that grate through the sintering machine. The coke would light up and burn and make the flame hot enough to get the clay hot enough to expand.
Interesting.
And so eventually he moved his sintering machines from Salisbury down to Gold Hill, where he heard there was a slate that would expand just like the clay did. He was running out of clay. The clay deposit that would expand was nearly played out. And so he moved down there and started working with the local quarry. It was next door to the Young Stone Quarry, and they would sell him the rock that would expand out of their quarry. But the family, the Johnson family, was part of. He wound up marrying B.V. Hedrick's, one of B.V. Hedrick's daughters. It's an interesting North Carolina story. B.V. Hedrick was in the sand and gravel business, still is, and so he had 3 daughters, and they all went to Duke. B.V. Hedrick went to Duke. All 3 of the daughters went to Duke. Now all the granddaughters have gone to Duke, and so they're big Dukies. But it's it's just a really good family. He wound up building rotary kilns in Gold Hill, North Carolina, and that's where our material comes from now. There's actually 2 plants. Stalite had a plant nearby.
That's right.
Stalite had a plant 25 miles from there, which we wound up buying in 2004.
Yep.
So now we have both of those plants. We're only running 1 kiln right now down at that plant, but it's in the same vein of raw material as the Gold Hill material. So it's all, pretty much all the same. Again, we could talk a long time about this, but just to provide a little color to listeners on lightweight versus normal weight, could you know what I mean? Just some brief notes on that. I spend a lot of time doing lunch and learns for structural engineers, and so that comes pretty natural to me now. Our biggest benefit of lightweight concrete or the most obvious benefit is the reduced density. It's by having a lighter slab, then you can use smaller beams. You can spread your beams further apart. You can have smaller columns, smaller foundations. So that's where, that's the most obvious benefit. But another benefit is that it has a better fire rating. So you can use a thinner slab to get the same fire rating as basically you can reduce the thickness of the slab by 1 inch. And so even though a yard of lightweight concrete costs more than a yard of normal weight, by the time, when you can reduce the thickness of that slab by 1 inch, then that, that savings catches up pretty quick on a large, building like a multi-story building, right, or a convention center or a hospital or that kind of job. Those are the main benefits that are the fire rating and the reduced grade
that's
density.
Good. No, that's good. That's really helpful. Let me ask you this. You've been in the business so long, and it's obvious that you enjoy it. It's very obvious. What do you enjoy about our business, about our industry? What can you say a little bit about that?
Definitely the people. It's just the people. My best friends are people that I've met and that goes for my competitors as well. Jeff worked for a competitive company, and he's retired now, but I'm still great friends with the people that he worked with, and we worked together through the Expanded Shell Clay and Slate Institute to do promotion work. So I love going around to engineers' offices and meeting them, seeing what projects they're doing, and I love my customers. I'm territory manager now for Georgia and Florida and Alabama and some in Mississippi, and so I get to carry on those friendships that I started when I was with the association.
Well, as you pointed out at the beginning of our visit, when you were a boy, you loved construction. That was your, you gravitated to that, and then to your point, the people in this industry it's hard to explain to, people are everywhere, and all businesses are obviously made up with people, but there's something magical about our industry. And I hear people who come to us, new associates who come to Ponte Vedra for the first time, they notice it, and they don't necessarily know exactly how to articulate what it is, but it's what you're saying. Yeah. And it really does make for an enjoyable vocation if you can work and enjoy.
There's easier ways to make a living.
Yes.
But I've always heard it said, something about it. When the cement gets in your blood, there's just something about you can't leave it.
You can't leave it. Well, look at me. I tried to leave it. I was 5 years away, and here I am. Just looking around at some of my notes and questions, but I would be interesting to hear as you look back over your a multi-decade career, what comes to mind in terms of the really big changes, developments, breakthroughs, milestones, so to speak, over your career thus far? Anything?
It's interesting to watch the changes of ownership.
Yes.
When Williams Brothers was the big one in Atlanta, they were independent family owned. Williams Brothers, Horace and John and the family and all the centers. And then when they sold to Blue Circle, and it's been interesting to watch Blue Circle wound up selling, a British public company. And then they sold to Lafarge, which was a French company.
Yes.
And then they sold to Argos, which is a Colombian company.
Yes.
So it's been interesting to me through the years to watch. Most of the big companies when I started at the association were British firms.
Yes.
And now they've kind of all circled around to where they're more South American firms. So that's kind of interesting. You kind of need a scorecard to keep up with all the changes in ownership, and of course there's still it's a constantly changing.
It really
world.
is.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. People have somewhat alluded to that in these interviews, but you really bringing that to the forefront that over the last 30 to 40 years, there have been some dramatic ownership changes and some vertical integration.
Thomas was
Bowen and
it started out was Bowen and Ben Hill,
right?
So that has come around. So
and yet, I mean, there's still Gus Pursley and the Davises and Cantrell and there Rusty down and so there's still a nice and Ken Williams and David, by the way, his son David's on our board now, and so that's been fun too. By the way, we've got DJ Ernst on the board, we've got Ben Cantrell, we've got Justin Womack, who's coming up with Rusty, and then and so it's been fun to see that.
And you mentioned
TJ Barton, of course.
Yeah,
he's been I've really enjoyed getting to know TJ. So so that's good. Let me change gears again on the subject. And you alluded to this, but I want to come back to it for just a minute, talking about influential people in your life. And you clearly have had, like we all do, people that sometimes we're more aware of it, and sometimes we're really aware of it looking backward. And we can see the role that someone played. Sometimes somebody can be a difficult person to work with, and then you look back and say, well, I'm glad they were diligent and rigorous with me. But what could you say a little bit about some?
Yeah, one of the guys that immediately comes to mind was Joel Hammond.
Yes.
Joel he was in the lightweight business, and he worked for Georgia Lightweight, and then they were bought out by Big River Industries. And so Joel was very faithful to call me probably once a month and say, let's meet so-and-so for lunch. And Joel is a fantastic idea guy.
Yes.
He would give me 1,000 ideas over lunch of things that we ought to do, for the promotion program. And some of them were pretty good ideas.
Sure.
And so we have remained friends, him and Barbara to this day. He was as much of a mentor as I could point to anybody. Joel was a great friend. And
what would you say? So let me pause you just real quickly. Can you say anything in particular that you learned from Joel? You talked, he was an idea guy, but
he was always encouraging me to promote myself.
Yes,
because I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
I just knew how to do my job. And so Joel was always encouraging me to do that. I think that was something that just never had occurred to me.
Yes.
And so he was great from that.
No, that's a really good point, because many people are in our generation or whatever. I mean, you grow up and you're coached about being humble and being humble, and so the idea that in the world of business, it's perfectly fine to promote yourself in a humble way, and to find opportunities and that sort of thing, and so that's good. That's I can't. And by the way, Joel is on my radar. I want to get with him. He's down in Columbus, I think. I've got to make that happen. So.
Well, you'll need to schedule 3 or 4 hours for that.
I know.
He's got lots of stories.
He's got a lot of stories. Of course, he and Rusty are our bingo guys. And if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned Walter Harvard. He and W.O. Maddox. They ran bingo before. Right. They were the legacy bingo guys. And what an incredible! How can you, if you can't have fun at GRMCA bingo night, you can't have fun. Isn't that a great time?
That is. Yeah.
So much fun. This next question I've got is a chip shot for you, of course, but I like to hear their perspective on the benefits of membership to our association. And I believe there are many. And now that I'm back and I'm in this role, I see even more all the benefits. But could talk a little bit about that.
I think associations can do things that individual companies can't do. And I think that under your leadership, you've reorganized the committees, and I think that's a great benefit. The work that all of the committees, I'm on the technical committee, and so the work that the liaison with the Georgia DOT is priceless.
Yes,
and the Concrete Day training program for engineers and concrete, engineers and contractors. That's a great benefit and great activity. All of the committees do really, really important work, and so that's and the annual meeting. For somebody like me, you go there and you see all of your membership.
Yes.
I mean, all of your customers in one place.
Yes.
And a chance to deal with them and their families.
Yep.
On a level that you just can't do any other way. So that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, the committees have been, back when I was involved in the association, when I was at Vulcan, and I was, when I came in as a vice chair under Alan Deerso at Fowler. He was the chair, and then he moved on, and then it was me, and it was Ryan Chanley was with me, but during that period of time, we didn't have any real committee activity going on, and I was so busy at Vulcan, it just didn't register, to be honest about it. But that's, to your point, what I've seen, and it's a short period of time. They're really just still we're getting them off the ground, right, and getting them in stride. But the potential, the impact, now we've got workforce, we've got the technical, and then within technical we have education, and then the GDOT, and we've got, of course, I mentioned the work. Whenever I start listing these committees, I always leave people out, but we've got a lot of great committees. Right. Yeah. And we're getting, it's a great way to connect in particular areas and tackle as a collective, like you said, particular issue. Legislative committee for sure is new. We've never had, as far as I know, so now we have a legislative committee. Richard Davis is our chair, and that gives us a much more coordinated, concerted effort, and that we're seeing a lot of benefits from that. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, coming up on the question I always enjoy, last question, eager to hear perspective, is for people coming into our industry. They may be young, they may be old, doesn't matter, but coming into our industry, what advice would you give? What counsel?
Well, pretty much any level that you come into the ready mix, I would say get involved either with ACI or ASTM, depending on which, what your interest is, because both of those have a lot of impact. People don't realize how much impact that what goes on the committees with ASTM and the American Concrete Institute, ACI, how much it can influence what we do in the ready mix business, and of course, get involved with the Georgia Ready Mix Concrete Association, because I mean, you got to have their support if you're going to be able to do the projects and run the committees. So get involved, because I believe it benefits the individual that gets involved, because there's so much you can learn. You can learn so much more by just going and being involved in the committees and listening to other guys' experiences, and that's I recommend highly that they get involved with either ACI or ASDM or both if they can, and the association.
You know, that's a really good piece of advice. That may be the first time that's come up, and I'm almost certain it is, as a matter of fact. But as I think about it, as you say that, they are two highly influential organizations that, as you well know, that affect how our products are tested and evaluated, and it's very important. And as you were talking about it, and this came up actually was with, as I told you earlier, I interviewed Paul Ramsberg with Sika yesterday, and this came up. But I think the people in our industry are very generous with information. You don't really, I'm talking about obviously, technical matters and legal stuff, just to be crystal clear. The things that we're, as a trade association, we're allowed to discuss, and safety and environmental and the technical matters. But it's so enjoyable to me when we're in a technical meeting, and we've got a big technical group, as you know, you're a part of it. We're well represented. Hugh Pappy, you talked about Hugh. Hugh comes up from Savannah often, and others. But what I'm getting at is that it pleases me to watch them in action, share learnings, challenges, problem solve things together. It's just that kind of, you don't see people trying to keep it to themselves, everybody, there's plenty of competitive space out there to distinguish yourself, and everybody does. They've got their own way, and Ernst runs, Ernst is Ernst, and Thomas has their, what I'm saying.
Sure.
So, but there is a nice atmosphere. So those are really great tips, and so very good. Well, Ken, I really appreciate. We could spend the afternoon easily, and we'll have to come back and once I get through my first round, I'll probably swoop back around, because I always leave with more questions than I had in the beginning. But I do appreciate you driving down from Waleska to Alpharetta. We're actually, folks, by the way, we're sitting in my old conference room at the old Fulton Concrete office headquarters in Alpharetta, which is now a Thomas Dispatch Operations Center. It's the first time I've set foot in here in, 7 years. And so it's fun to be back. But Ken drove in from Waleska and to conduct this podcast. So I do appreciate it, Ken. I really do.
I appreciate you inviting me. It's fun to go down memory lane.
It is indeed.